Welcome back, Mr. Goodberry. The First Star Logistics studio is fully equipped and ready to record.
Welcome, Bengals fans, to episode 108 of Bengals On The Brain, presented by First Star Logistics. I'm Joe Goodberry, and we are a day away from the first preseason game of 2024 for the Bengals, which means the season's here. All the offseason, the draft talk, free agency, the analysis, the pointless discussions, the rankings, all of that stuff is over with. Well, sort of. There is a lot that preseason still offers. I love preseason. I really do. There's people that just can't wait to get it done with, to get to the regular season, wait till the games matter. But for me, if you didn't know, if you're a newer follower or listener or watcher, uh, everything for me is evaluation, player evaluation. It's one of the pillars of what I love about football. And for me, preseason is a huge part of it. And yeah, there's camp and practices, and there's so much more that we don't get to see. But I think, and like listening to Duke Tobin and other GMs and player evaluators and scouts and whatever else you can get your hands on when people talk that are in those positions, they hold preseason with a little bit more weight than the actual practices. Mostly, there are some that you may not see that guy in those situations, or they're in vanilla situations in preseason, so they may not hold as much weight when evaluating that player. And we'll get to that discussion more as we have film to break down, which would be the next episode of Bengals on the Brain. After they play their first preseason game, we can come back and say, all right, now how did these guys look? How did they perform? And that's a lot of what we're looking for. And that's a lot of what preseason is about, mostly is what it's about. And yeah, we know they'll be in vanilla situations, meaning the offense and the defense aren't calling a lot of crazy things, but yet still they need to see them react in controlled environments. And we'll get a little bit more of that too when the joint practices happen in the next couple weeks for preseason games. But in this first one here, I think there's a few topics and discussions that I want to go over and what to expect, what we're looking for. That way we can come back and we can unwrap it once the game has happened. And once we get the film, we can say, okay, yeah, this guy did look good. And there's a few, and I think I want to start on the offensive side and the offensive line. And while we've been talking offensive line for years, there is a lot to look forward to in this game. Number one, marrying practice with the first preseason. Trent Brown is now activated. He did take part in practice when they're in the stadium on Thursday, and that's good. You see him in team stuff in 11 on 11 situations. We're waiting to see that, but to see him do individuals and one-on-ones with pass rushers, that's good. It means he's passed the conditioning. We knew that before when he was activated, but also to see him start to get mixed in. And it's good because he's expected to be their best pass protecting offensive lineman. And if you remember when he was signed, we did an episode on it. We looked at him and we looked at what he can and can't do, what he offers. We knew he was going to be a guy you have to work into shape every year. That's one of the things that I think frustrated the Patriots and the Raiders, why he was still available, why he was available for so cheap. And you don't want to get him hurt either because it's a guy who has had durability issues. So they've kept him as close to the season as possible before activating him. I don't think we'll see him in preseason. But why I want to talk about Trent Brown is because Amarius Mims has looked so good in these camp practices and clips and the reports that you read. And he does look that good. I love the one-on-ones with he and Miles Murphy, now that Murphy has to play that more with the rash of injuries they had at defensive end. But that's good to see your last two first-round picks go head to head and lock up. And man, does Mims look good. And how can, and I know some people that aren't like into the player evaluation side, they say, how can you tell if a guy looks good? Or how can you, and this will be work for when we go into the game, how can you tell if a player is performing well other than the results, right? Because we're talking a results based evaluation would be, oh, he gave up a sack. That must have been a bad rep. That's not always true, right? Let's say the quarterback's holding the ball. Let's say the right guard steps on his foot and he gives up a sack. Sure, bad outcomes, but is that the fault of the player? So that's an evaluation based on results. We want to avoid that if possible. We want to put players in a vacuum, just isolate them, put the microscope on them, and see how did they perform, how do they move, how do they react, do they look strong, do they look athletic, do they look big, do they look like they're stressed out, do they look like they're handling the guy across from them. And for Mims so far in all the clips we've gotten, that's exactly like all those you could check them all. Yeah, he looks good. He looks good. Looks good. Looks good. He moves very well. He's redirecting very well. That massive size and strength, we knew that would be an asset for him, and he's using it. But I think his nimbleness and his feet are what are impressing me so far. The way he's redirecting and moving with guys and not giving up. A lot of times with big guys, they're good for 2 seconds, and then that afterwards, we'll see this with Orlando Brown Jr. at times. And I think when he was with the Chiefs, Joseph Osai beat him for a sack in Cincinnati because Brown's like, all right, 2 seconds, and that they just don't have the stamina if they're. But Amarius Mims is a freak athlete as well, just completely chiseled and in great shape that he can stay with it, and it's not a problem. And some of those blocks, just from a size strength perspective, I'm like, that looks like a Willie Anderson. That's how you get those guys. This is how you get Willie Anderson, Andrew Whitworth types, big, strong, and athletic and young. So the formula is there. I can't wait to watch him. He's probably player number one in preseason for like, all right, who do you want to watch? Who do you want to see? Who, if they perform well, will really get you excited. Number one for me is Amarius Mims. So what happens if he does play that well? What do you do with Trent Brown? How do you marry that? How do you mix that together? We'll have to figure that out. I mean, both guys haven't proven to be able to stay healthy recently, so it'll be interesting to see how they handle it and if there's some type of rotation or this is just preseason. Get Mims as many reps as possible to give him, he needs the experience. Remember, he didn't have that many reps in college as it was, so get him as many as possible, and then for when the time comes when Brown does go down or needs a game or two, that's when Mims steps in. So number one, starting with that. I want to stay with the offensive line just a little bit. I expect they'll start with the starters. We know the starters are going to play for the first time. It's been 4 years since the starters have played. But Alex Kappa, to me, in the clips we've gotten, has not looked great. I think he may have lost some lower body flexibility. Remember, he dealt with that injury, was at the end of the 2022 season, when he was out for the AFC Championship game. Same way he got hurt with the Bucks, lower body guys getting blocked into him. I wonder as he's getting older if he's losing some flexibility. He doesn't look as quick to me. He seems to be losing leverage, which means he's playing too tall and letting guys get underneath him. And it's usually BJ Hill. BJ Hill, maybe BJ Hill's on a career year. I would take that trade-off, because I think the Bengals need more. I think the offensive line is better than it's been. And I think the defensive line at defensive tackle could use somebody to step up and have a big year, whether that's Sheldon Rankins, whether that's BJ Hill. And if it's BJ Hill, I think I would trade maybe a last year's Kappa, which was down from 2022. 2023 Kappa was here, still quality. But if you get this BJ Hill, I think I'd take that. But for Kappa, I hope he is just dealing with things and going through something right now, but because we could use this level of Kappa. I mean, I'll take BJ Hill here and Alex Kappa here, but if I could pick one or the other, I was thinking this the other day after I saw Hill beat him for a rep again, and I was like, I think I'd rather BJ Hill be the one that's winning those reps because we really need him at defensive tackle to step up, especially with the injuries along the defensive line. So I'm keeping an eye on Kappa. Is that going to continue? Is that going to be a trend? Is this something that we're going to have to worry about through the season? And, I don't want to make too much of a few clips, but it seemed like a trend to me. The other one, and I talked about Matt Lee when we did the depth chart. He got more second team reps. I can't wait to see when he's inserted. He's probably going to be a guy. I mean, all of the rookies, right? We're going to focus on in the film afterwards. But I think center is one you could focus on during the game. And I kind of want to focus on what we could watch during the game and see, because player evaluation, there's a few positions you could actually just focus on the broadcast angle and watch them and see what they do. Center is one of them. The ball, that's where it's starting. It's getting snapped. Keep your eyes on that guy from when Matt Lee gets in and see what he does and what he was really good at. If you remember, if you watch that episode when we broke down his film, quick off the snap, very good at combo blocks and very good at getting to the second level and latching on the linebackers. So if he can do that, it'll secure his spot on the roster, which I think is still a battle with Trey Hill. So we'll have to see how that goes. Even though I think he's better than Trey Hill and should be better in the long term than Hill, you still have to win that job. So focusing on him will be fun. And I don't The next one to me is another rookie, and I don't know how much he'll play because he was just activated, but it seems like he's activated without limitation because he's practicing a ton, and that's Eric All at tight end. And how much are you actually going to play Gasecki and Sample, right? You kind of need Sample. He's your only blocker on the team. I wouldn't have him out there too much. He's still listed as tight end one. We talked about that in the depth chart episode. So I don't expect Sample to be out there a ton. He and Gasecki probably sparingly for that first drive with starters, and then you get them out of there. And then it'll be Tanner Hudson and Eric All and Tanner McLaughlin in the depth. Uh, but I think All could end up playing a ton, and he needs it, right? He hasn't played a whole lot, but I want to see how good he is early. I've been really impressed with his movement skills and ball skills. One of the things I didn't like when we watched the film was I thought his hands weren't as natural as you would hope for a guy who's going to be a high end potential tight end. Like if he can end up being a tight end one status, I thought All struggled with his hands. But watching him in these clips so far, I'm like, he's making really nice hands catches away from his body in traffic and coming down with it. And so, like, guys can develop. You can have injuries and still catch passes and develop in that way. And he could get better. So then maybe he did. So I want to see how much he's going to play, how they use him, how they use him as a blocker. A lot of these young guys are coming to the league and they're not great blockers. This is true at running back and tight end. So, uh, how will they look in that uh, portion of the game? But I'm really excited to see if he gets some passes downfield and see if he can run after the catch and be a big body athlete and what he can do for this offense. And because if he's good right away, does that carve out a role? Because the other part of making a roster, you just want to make the 53 and then the practice squad. You want to be one of the active on Sunday, right? And if he is, I would say as of now, you would expect him to be inactive on Sunday, which is fine for development early in rookie year. But like if somebody goes down, can he help you? Can he be active and be an asset? And I think a lot of that is, can he block? Can he catch? Can he split out wide? Because these tight ends are going to split out a bunch because Gasecki and Tanner Hudson can do that. But also, uh, can he do that with, can he block and can he play the Y? Who's going to be the backup to Drew Sample? Is it Eric All? He might be the next one for it, and maybe they're grooming him for it because he looks big and stocky out there in practices with pads on. So I'm interested in that. Charlie Jones went down, and he was someone I was really excited for when we did the depth chart episode. I talked about how the three receivers, a combination of Jermaine Burton, Andre Yosivas, and Charlie Jones could make them really, really good and new and dynamic and faster and more explosive from the slot position. But it takes all three. Does it? Could you do with just two? Jones went down non-contact. They said, or the locker room may have said, I think it was Yoshi said they banged knees or someone banged knees with Charlie Jones and he went down. They're positive about it. We'll have to see. I bet we won't get word until after that game. Or maybe, you know what, they probably interviewed Duke Tobin during the game. He's usually forthright with stuff like that. So maybe we get a week-to-week prognosis or something on Charlie Jones. But with him being down, that doesn't just affect the receiver room, it affects the return room too. So watching these returners in preseason, it was the Giants Patriots game was just on last night. We had a kick return there that was big. We'll have to see the kick return situation, which is a whole conversation. I'm really excited to see that and see if Darren Simmons goes with, hey, we're going to go vanilla, or if he goes with, we're going to mix it up and try some things that I've got up my sleeve for when the regular season starts. But with a different returner back there, not having Charlie Jones, maybe they go a little bit vanilla. But one guy I do think could step up in that, and people have asked on Twitter, with Charlie Jones down, is it Hakeem Butler? Is he now got a spot to make the roster? Or again, we got to figure out how long Jones is out for. Or is it Shedrick Jackson? And I think Jackson has taken steps. I thought he flashed last year in preseason. And if he flashes again in this preseason, he's going to have a chance because he's made plays in camp, in practices. He's a guy who has speed, can play special teams for sure. So if that's what it takes to make this roster, that he's going to be a special teams guy, could be a return man, and offer some speed from different positions on the offense, that seems like a fair one for Charlie Jones. Seems like a direct replacement for him because Akeem Butler's more of a big slot, big tight end type. Because there were some reports calling him a tight end. It seems like he's just working with receivers. But I remember him coming out of college. Some thought he should be a tight end because of his size, and he didn't have that explosiveness you're looking for at that wide receiver position. So we'll see how Hakeem Butler does. But I bet he's the Auden Tate. Like, you're going to get a crazy catch out of Hakeem Butler in this game. So I'm waiting for that for sure. And then for me at running back, how much are they going to use Zach Moss and Chase Brown? In previous years, it's been like, all right, they're going to use Chris Evans or Travion Williams a lot more in the offense. And then those guys are still out there touching the ball late in the second quarter. If Chase Brown is still touching the ball late in the second quarter in preseason game 1, I might have an issue with that. And I may have to pull back some of the hype I've been burning on Chase Brown. So I expect that he and Zach Moss will be out there for the first quarter or a bit of it, depending on how many drives the offense will be out there or the offensive line will be out there, and then get them out. And then you're using Travion Williams, Chris Evans, and the depth to round out the rest of the game at running back, because running back's been one of those positions in preseason where you can mix it up and have somebody can make a name for themselves and stick on a roster or be a practice squad guy. So we got to see who that fourth guy is. I still feel like that fourth running back is not on the roster, and the Bengals will be looking at the waiver wire when it comes, unless you just keep 3. That's the thing I keep doing, and we'll have a 53-man projection or a final roster projection. And when I get to running back, I go, do you even keep 4 just to keep Chris Evans inactive? But now with Charlie Jones down, he'll have a chance to be the return man. And I think he's decent there if he can follow the blocks the way they're supposed to be. So that's why we'll need to know if Darren Simmons is going vanilla or going a little creative and asking Chris Evans to do something a little bit more fun where he has to follow the rules and follow the blocking the way it's drawn up. And that's what I'm looking for on offense. Let's flip it over to the defensive side. And on the defensive side, starting with the defensive line and defensive front, with so many injuries and a lot of guys not expected to play, McKinley Jackson was a newer one from this week. And then we've got both defensive ends. Even though Trey Hendrickson returned to practice, I would not expect him to play in this preseason game. If he does, cool. Get him a few reps and get him out of there. I don't think it's worth it. But his replacement now, I think, is definitely his replacement after Cam Sample went down, because Sample was playing more left defensive end. Miles Murphy was getting some right defensive end. Now Murphy is the left, and it looks like Osai is the right. Osai, remember last year? I went back and looked at clips from preseason. He was having a fantastic preseason. We're like, oh, breakout candidate, breakout. Then he was playing in that final preseason game in Washington and playing was it after halftime? It was way too late. And he twists his ankle on that terrible field. And I remember my reaction, like, why? What is going on? This coaching staff must not value him as much as we all did. You may not all of us, but most of us thought he could have a very good year last year. If we see that again, if we see him playing into the second quarter of preseason, I'm going to lose my mind. So I hope for him and for our sake and for the show's sake that I don't have to lose my mind because he's still out there in the second quarter. Give him his reps. Give him out there with the starters on defense, depending on how that goes. Typically, it's different for offense, right? Offense, you have a set of some scripted plays you want to run through. Hopefully, you have a full drive and a touchdown. Defense, a lot of times, if they get a 3 and out, they'll pull them out, and that's it. Or if they give up a long drive, they'll have to go out there again and prove it again and finish it off. So whatever the starting defense is, whatever the length is, I hope they treat Joseph Osai as a starter and don't give him unnecessary hits. Listen, this is a guy who has not stayed healthy. This is a guy who's dealt with injuries more than not in his career. You can't put him out there unnecessarily in preseason. I mean, the development time is done. This is year 4 for him. Who he is who he is. Let him go play and let him be a primary backup and a valuable backup. I mentioned it during the depth chart episode that he has the second highest pass rush win rate in his 2 years of playing when he has played. And that remains true. We need that. This team needs pass rushers. You can't put them out there and put them in harm's way more than what is necessary. But I feel the exact opposite with Miles Murphy. Murphy is still developing. Murphy still needs the time. He still needs the time at left defensive end, because remember, he was a primary right defensive end at Clemson. Let him hang out a little bit out there. Let him play. Let him use his moves. Let him figure out how to go against someone other than Amarius Mims, where he's absolutely getting swallowed, even though Murphy's not small, right? That's one of the main selling points when they drafted him. The big dude at defensive end. Let him see if he can do something against a different opponent and let him try some things out. And I feel this very similarly at defensive tackle. While they have signed a bunch of veterans to play probably a third and fourth quarter. Let's see Chris Jenkins. I was listening to Jake Lisco of Lockdown Bengals do his review, and he said Jenkins flashed a couple times, and it may have been 2 sacks during Thursday's practice. Okay, there we go. Now we're starting to hear something out of Jenkins. Did I say Jackson earlier? I hope I didn't. Jenkins, Chris Jenkins, uh, and then he flashed a couple times, and that would be nice to see because we're still seeing a ton of Zach Carter out there. That makes me nervous. Uh, and maybe Carter is better this year. Maybe that's the case, but I'm not expecting it. And we need that third defensive tackle to step up, and we need a pass rusher inside to step up. And I'm hoping Jenkins can be that. Remember, Jenkins was a smaller guy who was a run defender at Michigan, didn't get a ton of chances, really pin his ears back and rush the passer. So can he do it? Is that something they felt he couldn't do or just didn't ask him to do? Because a small guy that is a run defender is not normally a great mix. So it would make sense if they viewed him more as a pass rusher, the Bengals did, and let him do that and operate in that way. And I would like to see it because that's something the Bengals desperately need at that position. The other thing is at corner, it sounds like DJ Turner is starting to pull away a little bit at that battle between he and Dax Hill. Maybe it was the depth chart influencing me. DJ Turner did have a pick of Joe Burrow on Thursday. But I thought it was funny. Dan Hort talked about this in his 5 observations after practice, which is a great series. I always read that every time. But he said the defense has been calling Turner Mr. PBU, Mr. Pass Breakup. And so for him to finally grab one and come down with one, I thought was interesting and probably excited the defense. But that means that is he struggling getting his hands on the ball and coming down with it? That was something we did a film review on last year. Not that he was struggling to get his hands on it, but that he needed to work on breaking up more balls. He would be around, but not affect the ball, not affect the receiver more. So is that something he's improved on? Could be. He may have earned the nickname because he's breaking up so many passes and not coming down with them. But I could see that as a positive because he needed to get his hands on more balls. But that was something he did last year as the season went on. Even though his coverage was getting worse and worse as the year went on, his ability to knock passes away and affect the ball was ramping up just a little bit. How does that happen? How does the light turn off while I'm recording? I'm gonna leave that in. Dave Burke, leave that in for me, because maybe we're gonna go back and be like, yeah, the lights are out on DJ Turner. Dax Hill is gonna step up and make plays and show that length and show that strength and show his former safety self as he comes in and makes plays and makes tackles in the run game from the corner position. That would be nice to see in preseason because I thought that's an area where the Bengals really struggled last year. Other than Mike Hilton, they struggled on the boundary to tackle and be forced defenders in the run game. And I think Dax Hill can, at the very least, be that. I'm excited to see how his transition has gone from safety to corner and get a look at him from a technical aspect. How do his feet look? How do his hips look? How is his press? The thing you normally see with guys who are new to the corner position or not very technical with it, they end up grabbing a lot. They end up not trusting their hands and their ability to flip their hips and run and locate the ball. That'll be something to watch with Dax Hill and see how that goes. We're hearing a lot about Josh Newton. When does Newton get mixed in? Where does he get mixed in? I expect he'll play a ton, and that's exciting. I think Newton has a chance to be a very good depth player for them and maybe a potential like corner number 3. While we're not there yet and we don't need a corner 3, he's 5th on the depth chart right now, I would say. Him playing well in preseason would be good. And making an impact or making a play here or there would be good for his maybe long-term development and where we expect he could be in a couple of years. Again, focusing on these rookies and new guys, focusing on year 2 players to see how they have developed or jumped in that year 2 because we're supposed to expect that development. I go to safety, Jordan Battle. It sounds like there was no competition this year. And it sounds like Vaughn Bell and Geno Stone are the guys, but we have seen, and I've talked about this with subscribers on Twitter at Joe Goodberry, if you're not, and if you want to subscribe and have breakdowns of what clips we are getting from camp, we have seen a sub package with Akeem Davis-Gaither at linebacker and Jordan Battle coming in as an extra safety. So will we see that in preseason? Can we see how Battle will be used? Can we see if Battle has developed? Does he look quicker, more athletic? Does he, how has he changed his body? Has he gotten more into professional shape? and maximize what he can out of the athleticism he has, and the communication and the processing, which was supposed to be a strength of his. Can we tell? Can we see that? If it's a vanilla defense, can we tell that he's hitting? Because the hard part is I thought Dax Hill played really well last year in preseason at safety, and that did not translate. So the vanilla defense sometimes can put these safeties, vanilla offense too, can put these safeties in an easy position where they're not getting fooled as much. So that'd be something worth watching. The rookie, though, at that position, Dijon Anthony. They said Tyson Anderson, by the way, not expected to dress for preseason as he's still coming back from his injury from last year, even though he's been practicing. But Dijon Anthony uh, making a lot of plays, getting mixed in certain packages with the ones. I don't know what packages, no one's described what those were and what that looks like. So I want to see it. And can we get that in preseason? Can we tell what that looks like or what it is? And if not, then what kind of plays, what kind of player is he? Because I remember doing the film review and I thought hard hitter, processes pretty well, comes downhill and hits, and had decent ball skills. But I still wasn't sure. Like, is he a strong safety type? Is he, because he played some slot too? Is he a free safety type? What are they seeing him as? So I'm really excited to see what his role looks like more in preseason and what that means. And then, there's not really much to talk about linebacker, what we expect. Those guys will be out there quick. And then how do these guys, especially the depth guys on defense, they have to play special teams. I will actually watch that special teams film because first, who are the starters out there on kickoff, kick return, punts? Because those guys got a leg up on making the roster for sure, and they have a leg up on being active on game day. And how do they perform? You can tell, like Tyson Anderson, Akeem Davis-Gaylor, these guys, Darren Simmons loves, and you can see it usually in camp footages, camp footage, or preseason footage, and how they perform in the games. And those guys tend to be like the captains of defense. So Dijon Anthony, Jordan Battle, Dax Hill, all these guys are going to play. Josh Newton's going to play a ton of special teams. Mentioned Keem Davis-Gaylor, Shaka Hayward, these guys that are depth linebackers. Joe Bacci, we know that. How do they look on special teams? Eric All, Tanner McLaughlin, uh, Travion Williams, Chris Evans, and the depth guys there. Shedrick Jackson, I talked about. These are all guys that are going to have to make a play and make a name for themselves on special teams. And where are they on the pecking order? I really can't tell you. Like if Shedrick Jackson is out there before Josh Newton as a punt gunner, that is big for Jackson in terms of being on the roster. And it's not as big for Newton saying like, oh, he might not be active then if he's not a punt gunner, right? Because you want that fourth and fifth corner to be able to play special teams and be able to be out there as gunners typically. You make it one corner, one wide receiver. Like I said, that's why it could be Jackson. And Yoshi did it a bunch last year. So is it Yoshi? If you think like Burton and Yoshi are too valuable now to use on special teams, then who is the next guy? Because if Charlie Jones is also a receiver and a returner, can you put Trenton Irwin on special teams, or is he too much of a veteran at this point? That's why you got to see who that last receiver could be, and we could still see Yoshi out there on punts and kickoffs and running guys down, and it's because they may see him still as a depth player that will be rotated in. So these are all special teams things that you need to be aware of. They did cut Austin McNamara, the undrafted punter that we were excited for, that we thought he could compete with Brad Robbins. So Brad Robbins has defended off his job versus one guy, but the Ryan Recco signing of a couple weeks ago, the punter with a bomb for a leg, we got to see that, right? We got to see how he looks and see if he can blast off a couple punts and look really good. But also, you can have a strong leg, but how's your hang time? How's your directional punting? And how's your holding for McPherson? So that'd be something we zoom in on and see if it's affecting McPherson in any way. It doesn't seem like it has so far in camp. Robbins is considered a very good holder. Simmons has talked about it. So are you beating him out now as a holder? Is Recco the better punter? Seems like it, but is he a better holder as well? So we may focus on that. If he can bomb a punt, and then if they have no issues with snapping and holding, that's how you win that job, is the punter job. So that's something we'll pay attention to. This Saturday, Bengals' first preseason game. Lots to look forward to. A lot of fun. I love preseason. Again, we started with that, and a lot of tape. That means we're starting. And if you weren't here last year, If you just joined in and started watching Bengals on the Brain during the offseason and you like the draft film breakdowns and things like that, that is what you're going to get when the season rolls around and preseason rolls around. We are going to break down players that we thought, either situations we thought were interesting, plays we thought were interesting. A lot of it is player evaluation. We will put the microscope on Dijon Anthony, watch his 25 snaps from this preseason game and say, okay, this is what he did. This is something we should watch for. This is how they used him. These are the skills it looks like he brings to the team. If it's interesting. If it's not, we're going to skip and go to the next guy. Sometimes we go through a game and a guy doesn't do anything. There's nothing really to talk about. And people say, "Well, how did he play?" Well, there's nothing really to say yet. We'll table it and note things and see what becomes a trend and see what becomes more clear as the season goes on. But that's the fun stuff, and that's the exciting stuff. And that's why people watch Bengals on the Brain, presented by First Star Logistics. I'm your host, Joe Goodberry. Until next time, Hooday.
Dave Lapham here, and every day I am grateful for my experience to have played professional football. As a player, I realize self-motivation, leadership, and appreciating your teammates are key. At First Star Logistics, you can use those same attributes to create the life you want for you and your family. Build your future by working hard like I did. You'll see results both on and off the field. Call First Star Logistics today and be part of our winning team.
Opportunity knocking.